Yo, what up, a-holes? Thank you for tuning into the Holistic A-Hole podcast. My name is Erik Levi, and I'm the Holistic A-Hole, the mommy blogger with balls, the inconvenient truth of health. What's up, y'all? How you doing? Hope you're doing great. That's why you're listening to this, so you're feeling good, because if you're not feeling good, that's why I'm here, baby. And today, it's all about feeling good, or for some people, the lack thereof, because we're going to talk about depression and antidepressants. So maybe some of you who have listened to this for quite a while, or even maybe the first few episodes that I don't know, wherever you're at in your holistic a-hole listening journey, you've probably come to the conclusion that maybe, kind of, sorta, I'm not a very depressed person. And thank you for recognizing that, because I am absolutely not. And, I've been accused of maybe not having enough empathy for people who are suffering with depression. And I'll counter that with how much empathy do you need? You know? This is all we talk about, I feel like, in society, as generalized as that is. I feel like just all around me, I hear people talk about, we need to have a discussion about mental health. And then I hear people talk about mental health, and the conversation is just totally wrong. It's like we can't have a conversation about mental health unless we can really talk about mental health, specifically in the lack of efficacy of mental health drugs. I've had people hit me up and tell me that, I don't understand, how these drugs help people, and maybe I'm not being understanding enough, and people should be able to take these. And to be clear, I am not saying that people should just flat out not take, mental health drugs, whether it's antidepressants, anti-anxiety, anti-stress, anti-crying, you feel bad because it's cloudy outside, whatever it is, whatever your issue is. If you need drugs to get you over that, then look, that is your decision to make. You're an adult. Or some of you are kids. And if you're a kid listening to this and, you're caught up in this thing of like, I feel sad. I don't know, is it right to feel not even sad, but just like a general kind of like haze overhanging you? Look, you're a kid. You're a teenager, okay? If you are a teenager listening to this, your hormones are out of control, right? Adults' hormones are out of control. Okay, we're not supposed to be as happy as people say we're supposed to be. If you're just the person who kind of goes through life and it's like, I don't have highs, lows, I'm just kind of, steady, that's fine, dude. When you look at people's Instagram accounts and they're living their greatest life ever, you're not supposed to have that all the time, right? Life comes at you in a lot of different directions. And if you're trying to do shit, if you're trying to be shit, if you're trying to make something of yourself, then you're going to go through down times. In fact, you might go through real down times. You might come up against it where everything that you've ever worked for in your life is suddenly at stake and you feel like you're going to lose it all. And this gets you down a little bit. Yeah, it's going to get you down. Okay, if you're up against it and you're really trying and you're really out there working and you're hustling and you're grinding and you got goals and you got dreams and you're really putting yourself out there and the shit's not working out like you wanted it to, it's okay to feel a little bad. You're not going to just jump up and take a selfie and be like, everything's gravy, #blessed. That's not how life works, dude. You go through downs. And if you're not going through downs, then in my opinion, you're not trying. If you're just doing everything you can to just stay like, I guess like at average, then you're not really trying. Then if you're only getting average results, then you really can't be upset about that. And it doesn't mean that, man, I'm not balling out of control. I'm not hitting the club every night and taking these pictures with bottles and models and, I'm going on vacation and surfing and, I'm taking pics with, this celebrity or that thing or that, whatever it is, it's okay. Most people don't have that. And if you don't have that, it's really fine, but It doesn't mean you need to go out and just start dosing yourself with, these antidepressant drugs or anti-anxiety drugs. You don't got to run out there and get yourself your Zoloft prescription or Paxil or Celexa or any of these things. You just have to work harder. You just have to try harder. And if you're just getting denied and shut down and everything's not working out, then you need to work fucking harder, or you need to change your dream or your vision or your goal. Because that's how life works, dude. Nothing is handed to you. Even the people who the shit is handed to them, the rich kids, the 1%, the people who kind of get life handed to them on a silver platter because their parents went through it and worked it for them, they're the least happy people of everybody, They have all these studies, right, where it's like people who live out, the hunter-gatherers, the people who live out in the bush, who have nothing, or even people who are living in modern society, and they're living in the projects, or they're living, in some bad situation. Sometimes they are actually happier than the people who have the Benz and the Bentleys and, are able to get the really nice dinners, because that shit itself is kind of isolating. If you're a wealthy person, if you're a wealthy kid and you've got everything handed to you, you're really kind of in a league of your own. And if you don't have friends that are just like you, who are probably equally as spoiled and shitty, which in that case, why would you want to hang out with those people in the first place? Yeah, you're going to feel really isolated and alone. And I heard a statistic recently that like loneliness, like the actual feeling of loneliness, is the equivalent of smoking like a pack of cigarettes a day or something like that. Now, I'm just throwing that out there. I heard it somewhere. I don't remember where I heard it. I can't cite it. But I'm sure if you Google it, it's out there somewhere. But that just is a testament to what this stress of loneliness does to your nervous system, right? It fucks you up. It genuinely messes you up. So, my question is, for the people who run out there and go grab the antidepressant drugs, why are you still depressed? Why are there still people who are on all of these antidepressants and anti-anxiety, specifically SSRIs, why are they still depressed? Why do I have to hear people tell me that we need to have a talk about mental health in this country, when the people who are receiving for the treatment of mental health are the most depressed people there are? Does this conversation make any sense to anybody? Every time there's a shooting, like a mass shooting, which it seems to be happening freaking every week now, and people are like, well, we need to talk about mental health. Yeah, we do. We need to talk about the fucking way that pharmaceutical companies are just completely drowning us in their fucking chemicals, Oh, but we never talk about that. In fact, the people who try to talk about it, the people who should be talking about it, the CNNs, the MSNBCs, the Fox, the ABCs, the NBC, who are they sponsored by? Oh, they're sponsored by Paxil, Zoloft, Effexor, Luvix, Butrin. They're sponsored by all of the pharmaceutical companies. So do you really think that they're going to entertain a conversation that might, in fact, produce a solution that says, well, you actually have 100% control of how you feel? That this idea of a chemical imbalance is really kind of a misconstrued idea. I'm not going to say there isn't a chemical imbalance. Look, dude, we're made up of trillions of chemicals, right? We are all just bags of bacteria and chemicals walking around, okay? So yes, any feeling that you have going on in your brain is going to be a chemical imbalance of some sort. Now, that chemical imbalance could be, hey, it's a negative imbalance and you might feel like absolute hot garbage, or it might be a positive imbalance and you might feel like the fucking king of the world. So if you want a chemical imbalance, you should really be doing everything you can to put that imbalance into the positive, right? And really, the best way to do that is with lifestyle. Not fucking inhaling drugs. It's lifestyle. It's movement. It's breathing. It's hydration. It's fucking food. It's nutrition. It's all of these things. You want to talk about a chemical imbalance? What do you think food is that you put in your mouth? That's chemicals. What do you think water is that you put in your mouth? That's chemicals. Hydrogen, oxygen. It can't be any more simple than that. Breathing good air. People walk around places like New York City and Los Angeles can be the most miserable people you'll ever find. And they're like, ugh. This is all you hear walking around New York. Oh my God. Can you believe this? Can you believe that? Everyone's pissed off. Everyone in LA's pissed off. Well, look at the quality of the air in both of those places. Look at the quality of the water. How much are they going to put fluoride? How much fluoride do they need to put in the freaking water? How much chlorine do they need to put in the water? Both of which are both proven endocrine disruptors, both of which are proven to just wreak havoc on your gut. There are, I've been reading recently, connections between, depression and chlorine. Shit, I got to do a podcast about this. Depression and chlorine exposure. Which, is it any surprise then that someone like Michael Phelps now is the poster child for all of the suicide hotline ads? You know, I walk around New York City, there's phone booths with Michael Phelps' weird, goofy looking face. Talking about suicide prevention, call it suicide prevention hotline. The dude fucking lived the first 25 years of his life in a pool for fucking 12 hours a day, you know? So do we have any, association here, right? Is anybody studying this stuff? I know somebody is, but why isn't this on the fucking news every night? Why aren't they talking about this on the news? Why do we have to hear about Russia? Russia didn't do shit. The chlorine, the fucking fluoride, all of the pharmaceuticals that are in the water to begin with. We're reflushing pharmaceuticals into the water. Oh, and we're also giving them to the fucking food. You know, we're giving antibiotics to animals. The highest consumption of antibiotics in this country belongs to cattle and chickens to make them fatter, or to basically fight excess bacteria that they might get that might make them sick, to prevent against things like E. coli, which I get that that's good, but it's a really, stupid solution to a complicated problem. A complicated problem that could be alleviated if we return back to a normal way of actually farming, of recycling soil, retilling soil. By the way, I'm not a farmer, so I don't know if I'm saying that all exactly right, but you get what I'm saying, okay? The factory farming is the reason why we have to inject these animals with these chemicals and pharmaceuticals to begin with. It's making the frogs gay. The frogs are gay, right? We're tossing the pharmaceuticals in the water. The frogs are getting gay. Frogs used to be just hot, heterosexual frogs, guy frog, see a girl frog, he'd be like, ribbit, ribbit. Girl frog would be like, ooh, ribbit, ribbit. And then they'd fuck, and they'd make little beautiful frog babies. Now there's all these pharmaceuticals in the water. The frogs are sucking that shit up. The frogs are like, ribbit, oh, it's not fair that everybody else has a cool Instagram but me. I'm just gonna sleep all day because I'm a gay frog. It's all fucked up, dude. And there's so many chemical connections here that it's a really frustrating conversation to have. So again, I don't want people to think that I'm insensitive to people who are depressed. My heart goes out to you, man. But at the same time, my heart goes out to hoping that you can toughen up a little bit, that you can get off your ass and start finding solutions, all right? This idea that I can't get out of bed because I'm depressed. I understand if you're experiencing something like adrenal fatigue, or if you're experiencing like chronic pain, it could be very hard to physically lift yourself out of bed. I've experienced both those things, and to actually move around, it's a lot of physical work. But to open your eyes and then lay in bed for hours because you just feel depressed or sad or just in a general malaise, I mean, dude, that is just straight up horseshit. I'm sorry. I know I'm not sorry. If you're listening to this and you're one of these people who kind of falls onto that excuse, you need to get your shit together. You need to get your shit together. I'm sorry, dude. I'm not sorry. You need to get your shit together. You see what I'm saying? Not me. I need to get my shit together for you. You need to get your shit together because only you can physically lift yourself out of bed and be grateful for the fact that you got to wake up in the first place in probably a comfortable home, a comfortable bed, with the ability to actually move both of your legs to the kitchen to make yourself some breakfast or order Seamless or whatever you're going to do, and then go to your job that pays you money, You be grateful for that stuff, because you know what? There's people who don't get to do that shit. There's war veterans who had both their legs blown off. There's people who are living on the street begging for fucking money. There are people who were born, there are babies that were born with cancer. There are people who have just chronic disease ravaging their body, and you are just fucking sad because you get upset looking at Facebook because you have a quote-unquote chemical imbalance in your brain. Get the fuck out of here, dude. Seriously, man. I don't care if it's, if things just didn't go your way and you ended up in a job you hate. That's your problem, dude. Your problem. And I think as a culture, we need to stop feeling so sorry and empathetic for these goddamn people, okay? Here's what you do. Are you depressed? Do you have all of the abilities in your body to make shit happen? Well, then make shit happen. That's it. No one's just going to start handing you stuff because you had a worse sob story than the other person next to you. No, that is horseshit, okay? You're going to be sitting around for a long time sucking on the teat of the fucking state because you're going to go into... you're gonna be poor, and everything is just gonna trickle down. Your relationships are gonna start falling off. No one's gonna care about you, dude. No one's gonna care. All right. So I guess my point is, in the conversation, and I didn't mean to get off on a tangent of hating on depressed people. Look, if you're genuinely depressed, you need to listen to this podcast. Okay. And here's why. Because the idea of this podcast is, why are people still taking antidepressants, still depressed? Why are you still depressed? Does that make any sense? If you are taking a chemical, we're talking about a chemical imbalance that's supposed to rebalance your chemicals, why are you still depressed? If the thing is doing what it's supposed to do, which is why people take these things in the first place, then why are you still depressed? Why are you still taking these drugs if we've decided they don't work? Okay? And I'm not even talking about, the science and the clinical. I'm going to get into that here in a minute. But if we know, they tell you on the freaking insert of the drug that this drug does cause suicidal thoughts, okay? Happy people don't think about suicide. People not on those drugs, who are content with their lives, don't think about. So you know who thinks about suicide? Depressed people, okay? And if you're taking an antidepressant, if you're taking a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, then that was part of the deal when you signed up. You were supposed to say, I don't want suicidal thoughts, okay? Which just leads me to believe that the antidepressing feature of antidepressants is itself a side effect. That's all it is, That was the whole point of the drug. They figured out that this drug did all of these things, right? And feeling better just so happened to be a side effect. It's not the main effect. That's what all of these drugs are, by the way. They're all just side effects of the drug being in your body, especially something like these neurotropic drugs. These drugs that go in your brain and do all this crap, right? Because a selective serotonin reuptake inhibitor, the whole way that it works is, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm not a scientist. I might butcher the actual wording of this process. So if you are curious about this, go watch a freaking YouTube video. Go on to Google Scholar and look up the studies. It'll tell you right there exactly what this does. But basically, the idea of the SSRI is that your body makes serotonin. Some of it's made in your brain. Most of it is made in your gut. I believe the number is 90%. Upwards of 90% of the serotonin in your brain gets made in your gut. And it doesn't get made in your gut when you eat shit like McDonald's. It doesn't get made in your gut when you're sitting there eating, trans fats, when you're eating fried chicken, when you're eating ice cream, when you're just dousing your body with high fructose corn syrup, right? It doesn't make fucking serotonin, especially when you're taking antibiotics, especially not. Because this shit is made through your gut bacteria. Right? So if 90% of the serotonin, and then the shit gets shot up your vagus nerve, breaks in through your blood-brain barrier, goes into your brain, and starts hitting the receptors. So if we're talking about 90% of the serotonin that's made in your body coming from your gut, then wouldn't you think that it would be a good decision, if you're dealing with depression, to fix your diet? First thing out of the gate. First things first, Serotonin is a magical fucking drug. Okay, I don't know the evolutionary purpose behind it. I don't know why we have it in the first place. I'm sure as humans we didn't have it initially, but something came in over the last 2 million years or however long we've been humans for, and fucking nature said, well, humans need to have this serotonin thing because it seems to allow them to get excited and happy about things so that they do more good shit. Right? Somehow we realize that, when we build a shelter to keep us protected from the elements of nature, so we're not just getting rained on and snowed on and lightninged on, and, we can stay out of the cold, and, we can build a fire and cook food without it getting, doused by the rain or blown out by the wind. And that made us happy. And so nature said, well, if that allows humans to live longer, then we need to make more of that shit. And so now we have this beautiful thing called serotonin, and it's a fucking hack. It's a hack. If you can make more serotonin that goes into your brain, then you're going to be happier. It's a pretty simple concept. Now, I'm not talking about dopamine, okay? Dopamine is a completely different neurological process, right? Dopamine, that's like the hit. You know what I mean? That's like oh, baby, give me some more of that shit. Give me some more dopamine, That's like, tell me some good news. Boom, give me that dopamine. That's like, that's like watching porn. Boom, dopamine. That's like watching football. Boom, dopamine. That's like going shopping. Ladies, boom, dopamine. That's like just thinking about like somebody telling you like a compliment. Boom, dopamine. That's like, losing your shit because you haven't looked in your phone in 3 minutes. Pull out that phone. What's happening? Boom, dopamine. You ever watch somebody on their phone, like, when there's nothing else going on? Like, I'll watch people on the train look at their phones, and it's like a fucking coke fiend, Like, I was in a tunnel recently, and this girl next to me was, because we were all standing up, and she was there was no service. We're in the middle of the tunnel. The train was stopped. I had my book out, and this girl had her phone out, and you could see how she was on Instagram, and she was scrolling, and then she got to the bottom of the scroll, and because there was no service, she couldn't scroll any further. So she scrolls back up, and then she scrolls back down, and she scrolls back up, and she scrolls back down, and then I could see her thumb doing like this crazy twitchy thing, like the thumb was like a coke addict. Like, come on, man. Come on, just hit the button, baby. Hit the button. Let me move. Let me scroll. Give me something to scroll. And then she went and then she opened up the Facebook app. And then she scrolled down the Facebook app, and the Facebook app stopped, of course. And then she went and opened up the email, and the email could only go. And it's every time it said, cannot scroll, no service, cannot scroll, no service. And she must have opened up like 6 apps while we were sitting there. And finally, she opened up the goddamn Candy Crush app. And she was like, oh, I don't need service for this. And old thumb junkie was happy. Old thumb junkie was feeling good because now there was someone to move that thumb around. That's what dopamine is, okay? We're not talking about dopamine. We're talking about serotonin, the good shit, the sustained stuff, that real happy chemical that when you feel it, you're like, yes, everything in the world is good, okay? And it's made in your gut. And if you want more of it, you got to treat your gut right. First of all, you got to fix your gut. Most of you are dealing with really fucked up guts, okay? And I get it. I'm not coming down on you that, it's your fault. It is your fault. But the problem is the food supply is so screwed up that even if you think you're eating right, there's a good chance you might not be. And, you're probably dealing with leaky gut. You're probably dealing with gut dysbiosis. You're probably dealing with SIBO, maybe IBS. Maybe you just got the runs, the farts, diarrhea, whatever it is, okay? It's a good sign that your gut is fucked up and you might not be making the right serotonin. So you got to get the serotonin going on, okay? That is, the number one solution to dealing with depression or mild depression, okay? Lifestyle, get out there, exercise, go lift weights, resistance training, high intensity interval training, jogging, This all produces what they call endorphins. These are neurotransmitters. They're not, hocus pocus. They're not unicorn jizz. They're real fucking chemicals in your brain that you can produce yourself. So those days when you wake up and you're like, oh, I don't want to get out of bed, life just isn't fair. What you do is you kick your ass out of bed and you go for a freaking run and you'll be over that very quickly. Or just get up and do some goddamn push-ups or do some sit-ups or whatever. Do some kind of movement. Move your shit, right? The problem with the drugs is they don't do any of that stuff. They're just trying to bypass all of the actual natural human fucking mechanisms to just put more serotonin in your brain. And it's not that they put more serotonin in your brain. Basically what they do, the SSRIs specifically, is when the serotonin gets produced, like we were talking about, and you don't have to have a perfect gut, by the way, to have serotonin produced. You can have still a fucked up gut, but you're just getting less of it. So the little bit that you get, typically what happens is it goes into the brain, it goes into the serotonin receptor, it's used, and then it gets recycled back into your bloodstream, taken up by the liver, and then you pee or poop it out, okay? But what happens to SSRIs is when the serotonin goes in your brain, the SSRI basically blocks the ability for the serotonin to leave the brain. So what you have now is serotonin floating around your brain, and that's supposed to say, okay, well, now the serotonin stays there and it doesn't leave, so you're going to be more happy, right? And in theory, that sounds like a great idea, but so does communism. And we both know that that shit didn't work. So the deal with serotonin just floating around your brain is you have, I believe, 7 classes of subreceptors in your brain, and these affect things like mood, sleep, appetite, sexual function, and symptoms like pain, nausea, depression, and anxiety, okay? So basically what you have are all of these other entry points for this serotonin to hit. And, you don't want the serotonin in those receptors because it fucks everything up, right? Is it any surprise that people who are on SSRIs, one of the main side effects is sexual dysfunction? Is it any surprise that one of the, side effects of SSRIs are sleep dysfunction or loss of appetite or nausea or more anxiety? Is it any surprise? Okay, and let's just say this. When you have those dysfunctions, if you've got a sexual dysfunction, if you have a loss of appetite, especially if you have sleep dysfunction, you're going to feel pretty crummy. I don't know a lot of people who sleep like crap and are, just jazzed about life. Recently I've had some issues with my own sleep, and those days where I don't get great sleep, I don't feel like I feel now, like I sound right now, I feel pretty crappy. I'm kind of a grump. I do everything I can to put myself into a, as Tony Robbins would call it, a beautiful state. I do everything I can to be a champion. But, sometimes you just have those days where you feel like shit. And that's human. That's called being a human. Look at pictures from like 100 years ago. Look at the immigrant pictures, of like your great-grandparents. Look at the pictures of people who came in through like Ellis Island and were living in the tenements, or even just people in like the 1950s before they had, phones and all this great stuff we have now. Not everybody was smiling. Okay, 1930s, 1940s, you had the Great Depression, then we got over it, we won World War II. People weren't smiling. It was in pictures, they didn't make you smile. That's just kind of like the human condition, right? So no, you don't have to run right to go get an SSRI antidepressant if you feel those symptoms. You need to just do that shit yourself, because if you do grab an SSRI, one of the stated side effects is that you're going to experience one of the side effects I just listed, right? So the problem with these drugs is that they're not built to do the thing that you're expecting them to do. This is why people are still depressed on these drugs, because we are the experiment. It breaks my heart when I hear people talk about going and seeing like a therapist. Why? Well, because I just feel sad. Okay, now look. This is not to put a knock on therapists, okay, on therapy. If you need therapy, go to therapy. Like, if you need somebody, a trained physician to sit down and talk to, and they can break you down and, maybe help you get through your problems. And granted, people have all kinds of problems, This is not to belittle the fact that I understand, and I'm very, respectful of the fact that maybe you've had a little bit harder of a life than other people, Maybe you've experienced loss at some level, you have some trauma in your life. and it's manifesting in these different ways as an adult, okay? I'm totally empathetic of that, right? But again, you can't let that shit linger on you. You can't let it weigh you down because it's a thing that's happened already. It's happened in the past. You have to live your life in the future, and you are robbing yourself and those loved ones around you from you being at your absolute best by just reliving these past experiences. So yes, if you go see a therapist, yeah, you would really hope that they have the tools to get you through that. But you have people who go see therapists for years. And the therapist will put them on, the psychiatrist will put them on, these different drugs, because they've basically given up. It's like the mom who gives the kid the cell phone, the baby the cell phone to play with. It's like the therapist can't get the person to the root of the problem. So they say, well, take this drug and you'll just feel better and then come back and we can work on it because it makes the therapist look good. If they put you on the drug, it makes them look like they're doing their job when they're really not. They're just outsourcing the hard work and the hard labor to a fucking pill. And so you take the pill and sure, maybe it might work for a little bit, but then it starts to not work. You know why that is? Because most of these drugs that are out there are not put out with extensive clinical trials. Most of the clinical trials that they do to approve these drugs in the first place are pretty short term. Like we're talking 6 to 8 weeks, okay, of a clinical trial. By the way, the clinical trials that they present to like the FDA to get the drug approved in the first place, those are the clinical trials that actually saw the drug improve the participants in the trial, okay? That doesn't take into account all of the other clinical trials that showed to not improve the participants in the trial, because for every one approved clinical trial there are other, and it could be 1, it could be 5, it could be 10, it could be hundreds of clinical trials, it could be thousands of clinical trials that did not produce the result that the drug company wanted. So what they do, they scrapped it and then they started another one. There's so many stories of clinical trials that had to be stopped because people were reacting very badly. People were getting sick. People were committing suicide, having suicidal thoughts, being put in the hospital. And so the drug company has to pull the plug on it. But you don't hear about those, right? You hear about the ones that actually go the way the drug company needed it to go. And typically, a lot of times those studies are sometimes, pre-written, right? They're manipulated in a way. And this is not a knock on people who work for the drug companies. These companies employ hundreds of thousands of people, and they're well-meaning people, and they just are going to work to collect a paycheck. They got a degree in biochemistry or science or something, and they're just working to support themselves, and they're not the evil people that I can be guilty of painting with a broad brush as being evil. However, a lot of times the higher ups are able to manipulate these things to make it so that they get the desired result they want. And really, we're all just kind of rats in the cage taking that shit. And the people making them, they got to collect the paycheck. They don't know sometimes what these things are going to be used for. They're just going to work, punching the clock, hitting the buttons, typing the things up, doing what they're supposed to do. And every little bit sometimes adds up to the bad result. Okay, so these clinical trials are typically very short term, and a lot of times the side effects, like the real serious side effects, don't pop up until you've been using the drug for maybe 6 months to a year, maybe 2 years. People don't just jump on those drugs and immediately start experiencing, suicidal thoughts. Sometimes that takes a little while to manifest. So, and the FDA doesn't come forward and say, hey, we need more extensive clinical trials on this. They go, oh, well, looks like everything's okay. Boom, get that shit on the shelf. Run the ads during the Super Bowl. We're good to go, and these clinical trials kind of fucked up, Sometimes they have strict criteria that excludes people with significant comorbidities, which are like people who have multiple symptoms, so they might take people who have depression symptoms, but they won't let people participate in these trials who have depression and anxiety, or depression and whatever mental thing there might be, bipolar disorder, which, let's be honest, a lot of times people who are taking these drugs do have more than one symptom. Typically, I would say probably close to all the people who take these things, are probably dealing with, not just depression, but bipolar, not just depression, but anxiety, not just depression, but schizophrenia, so it's like, who are we even testing? Are you going to test this shit on me? Because I don't have any of that stuff. I could fucking sign a form and they're like, okay, hey, you want to participate in a clinical trial? We'll pay you $1,000 for your time. If I'm just like a poor, starving comedian in New York City and I need to make my rent, yeah, I might participate in that study. And if they're like, well, do you have any of these symptoms? I can go, yeah, I feel a little depressed. Boom, I'm in the study. And I don't have bipolar. I don't have schizophrenia. I don't have, all these other problems. And the drug will work on me. If it goes in and it's like, here's the serotonin, boom, just hanging around your brain, I'm going to feel like a fucking $1,000,000. I'll tell you that. But people who have like serious problems, those are the people that need to be studied, because they're the ones who actually really seriously need a drug, And then, of course, you have the problem, which is the problem in pretty much all of these, studies or epidemiological studies that you find in, especially food studies, which is people just don't report the right shit. They don't report sometimes things like flu symptoms, because sometimes they just have such low level, low energy bodies that every day just feels like the flu. Every day they're dealing with some kind of, like muscle weakness or, headache or something. And, the question is kind of posed where it's like, do you experience extreme migraines? And like, no, because they just have a constant headache and it just doesn't, they don't think that is worth reporting. Some people just don't report sexual problems, they, we're all proud people, and you don't want to put on a questionnaire. Maybe you think like, dudes, you're half a hard on. Maybe you're like, that's fine. I can silly putty that thing up in the old box. I don't have no sexual dysfunction. Get the fuck out of here. Who are you? So and they don't let those people, or they don't report correctly on the clinical studies. So it's like, there's so many problems. There's so many problems. With these things, especially another funny thing with the sexual dysfunction thing is sometimes the questionnaires themselves that they give the people are just not accurate at all. There's actually an example in one of these studies that I was reading. By the way, I'm going to have links to these studies that I'm citing in the show description on the podcast. So if you want to go through, look at it yourself, feel free, okay? Which is that sometimes they give these people the questionnaires to answer, which don't actually get at the fact that they might be experiencing sexual dysfunction in the first place. Like there's an example here where this one company, I forget which drug it was, but they put a questionnaire out and they said, oh, well, only 2 to 7% of people report sexual dysfunction. But they realized that they were using a really crappy questionnaire. You know what I mean? Like something to the effect of like, hey, man, are you getting laid every night? Hey man, you just like Motley Crueing your way through life right now, just banging chicks on your way to the mailbox, waking up at 1 a.m, just fucking like a rabbit. And of course people are like, nah man, I gotta go to work. But then when you actually give the people the real sexual dysfunction questionnaire, the number jumps up over 50%. In some people's cases, 80 to 90% of the population actually reported sexual dysfunction. So my point with all this is that when it comes to these drugs, why are people who take SSRIs and who take antidepressants, anti-anxiety, why are they still depressed? Because the shit doesn't work. Because where's the experiment? There's no guarantee that if you take a happy drug that it's going to make you happy. In fact, the science, the actual real, raw science shows that they're not going to make you happy. that these drugs are, you're basically buying a placebo, and I totally get it. If you feel like crap, you want a solution. You want a magic pill. You want the antidote. And so you go to your doctor, your psychiatrist, and, he'll ask questions about whatever, your childhood, your mother, your career, and that you just can't figure it out. And he's like, well, I need you to keep coming into my office. So here's some prescription drugs. And you take them because you want the problem to be fixed, but you don't want to do the work to do it because you're busy. Because whether you're working, whether you're hustling, whether you're grinding, whether you're just sitting around scratching your balls watching TV, you don't want to do the work, okay? But the fact is if you want to beat depression, if you want to not be depressed and not be anxious and not deal with these quote-unquote chemical imbalances, that you have to actually physically do the work to balance the shit in your brain, okay? And that is healthy diet, getting the right foods, getting the right, just a whole, well-balanced mix of protein and fats and carbohydrates, okay? Personally, I would, off of my own experience, I would say lean a little bit more towards the good saturated fats, the red meat, the butter, the freaking coconut oil. I know this is totally counterintuitive to everything you've been told, but look at the data. The fats are going to keep your insulin down. They're going to keep your sugar down. They're going to keep your if you got your sugar down, then your adrenals are going to work better. Your thyroid is going to work better. Your whole endocrine system is going to work better if you keep your sugar down. Okay, so eat fats, right? Eat good fats. Eat good vegetables. Wash your vegetables. Get all the fucking chemicals off them. Drink good filtered water. Go get a Berkey filter. Seriously, get a Berkey. That's the best filtered water you're going to find anywhere. You can put fucking pond water in there. It'll filter out like it just came out of, reverse osmosis system. Or get a reverse osmosis. Although I hear reverse osmosis is not the best, but just get a freaking Berkey filter. They're like $100, $200, and you have the best water you're ever going to drink with the fluoride filter. Get all the chemicals out of your fucking body. If you're living in somewhere like New York, LA, and no matter what you do, you can't move to the goddamn forest. Move to Denver. Move to Oregon. Move to Maine. Move to New Hampshire. Move to Florida where they got the beaches, but the politics are a little weird. Move to freaking, I don't know, somewhere that's gonna make you happy. You don't have to live where you don't want to live. Right? Especially if you live in America, especially if you're listening to this on an iPhone, especially if you can do whatever the hell you want, right? Go live in freaking Fiji. Go live in fucking Bali. Go live somewhere beautiful. Go travel somewhere beautiful. Go live in Costa Rica. Work on a goddamn fucking strawberry farm. I don't know. Do something that breaks your pattern and makes you happy. Because you don't need to live to be unhappy. And I'm going to say it one more time. The drugs are not going to make you happy. I hope you all enjoyed this little rant here. I'm curious to know what you think. If you agree with me, if you disagree with me, if you just have thoughts about this, if you have experiences with this stuff, please shoot me a message on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all Holistic A-Hole. If you haven't done this yet, join the Holistic A-Holes Facebook group. And if you haven't done this yet, make sure you subscribe to the podcast. Go on to Apple Podcast Reviews. Leave a 5-star review for the podcast. It would certainly make my day. And you can tweet me, whatever you want. But if you're new here, make sure you go through the old podcast. Listen up because they are doozies. Thanks so much for listening, everybody. Hope you enjoyed the podcast. I'll catch you on the next one. Peace.